All right. Well and truly, people got their backs to the walls, haven't they, with all the costs heading to households. Today, we find the big four banks have downgraded their own growth forecasts. And for the first time, we've got ANZ Bank and Westpac tipping a per capita recession, they say likely, in the coming year. Joining me now to discuss this, Sky News business editor, the wonderful Ross Greenwood, who is here every night before I turn up, and Sherry does as well. We haven't had an official recession for some time, Ross. We both understand that, but we've been in a per capita recession before, so that means a recession at a household level. I think that's where it's politically dynamite for the government, isn't it?
Well, it really is, and this is the whole issue about the cost of living crisis and the interest rate rises that are hitting those with the mortgages. But then those who don't have mortgages even are still getting big hits from not only the price of electricity and energy going up, but also the price of insurance premiums, so many more things, including services as well. Now, you look at the ANZ, you look at, say, Westpac, what they're saying, but here's Paul Bloxham, former Reserve Bank economist, HSBC's chief economist, and effectively he says that for Australia to avoid a recession now, it looks as though Australia's economy will tip into recession, and frankly, it's hard to believe that Australia's inflation can fall back to the central bank's inflation target without the economy in recession. So, this is now the narrow path the Reserve Bank governor has talked about, but the fact is that there are at least two more rate rises likely to come, and that's where that path gets narrower and potentially Australia falls into that recession, or indeed at the household level, almost certainly.
So we've got weak productivity. We've got now this wind back in growth forecast. We've still got this massive migration intake underway. I mean, that's where we're in trouble, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's one issue there, and that is the housing issue, because as there is a lack of housing for 1.5 million people coming into this Australia over the next 5 years, you've got construction companies going broke. That's the area of greatest pressure in Australia right now. So you can't build the houses while you've got construction companies going broke. They simply won't build. Developers won't build if they can't make money. So you've got the compounding problem of rising rents. So even if you don't have a mortgage, you've got rising rents in some places in capital cities by 25% per year. So there's a supply and demand imbalance in our overall economy right now. And while the government keeps on saying this inflation is imported as a result of war in Ukraine, that's not right. This is homegrown inflation. This is the reason why the Reserve Bank keeps on having to raise it, because of these supply imbalances, because of the pressure for wages to rise. And really, this lands back at the feet of the government, not at the Reserve Bank.
Right, what do you make of the fact that state governments are on track to have greater Commonwealth debt, greater debt than the Commonwealth? Debt issuances by states expected to hit $96 billion in the 12 months to the end of June next year, $21 billion higher than the Commonwealth's $75 billion. 2/3 of that, of course, New South Wales and Victoria alone.
Well, this is one of the real sleepers for Australia if it did go into recession. One of the points is that if we have a recession right now, it would appear to be a relatively shallow recession. And it's not characterised by the normal traits of recessions, which is bad debts in companies in particular and bad debts for banks, which, then start to appear wobbly themselves. Australia feels pretty good at the moment for all of those things. But you've got state governments taking on so much debt along with the federal government, you then start to create some real issues, not only for credit ratings for those states, but then also for the availability of credit. The worst scenario for Australia right now is if there is a credit squeeze. We don't have one right now. There's nothing on the horizon right now that looks like a credit squeeze, but with the states taking up all of that debt right now and therefore allocating all of that debt, even though some of them are forecasting surpluses into the future, the reality is that they've got big building works, they've got big debts, and that actually causes fundamental problems if Australia does have an economic downturn.
I have learnt never to trust a state treasurer with a budget forecast, so we'll see if any of that ever comes to fruition. This report into working from home by the ANU, it's revealed that average workers are less productive, or surprise, surprise, more depressed, they say, as a result of working from home, although that, they say, should be noted or attributed to poor management. Now, this is part of the problem. How do we lift productivity if we can't get people to get back to work and be more productive in the office?
Well, the argument was if people at home were more productive because they didn't have to travel to and from the office. But if they're not happy in the work, that makes them less productive, as you point out. There's another aspect of this, because we're talking recessionary talk. If you want to look at one sector which could trigger a big recession in Australia, it's the commercial property market, in particular the office markets in our capital cities. Because if people are not coming into those offices, the value of those offices is falling like a stone right now. There's no new building, and as a result of that, that could trigger the losses that could really tip Australia into recession. So in many ways, getting people back to the office would not only alleviate many of the problems that they have, but would also perhaps alleviate some of the real pressures that could cause the economic downturn in Australia. That is the price of offices falling significantly in this country.
Shame on you, Ross Greenwood. You're a Gen Xer and there's just far too much common sense in all of that. We'll catch up with you again soon.